It seems sadly sometimes the bully does win. Obviously, Zelensky had little hope of outlasting Donald Trump, and in the end, Donald did indeed, as he pointed out in his graceless manner, hold all the cards, although he hardly needed to make such a performance of it with a man in such under such pressures and his country had been invaded. But I'm more interested in the responses today by various media outlets, and in particular, two of them. And I'll turn on the sound. I'm more interested in the Irish and British media outlets. I'll start with the British one. Now, the British one has Zelensky ready to work under Trump's strong leadership. Well, I suppose you could call it that. Um, Bullying doesn't strike me as strong leadership, but there you go. I suppose it depends how you define strength. But I found this info diagram a little mini documentary for 2 minutes more amusing, where by BBC Verify. And I'm going to play it because I found it, one, it was hilarious, and I'm going to have a look at it.
And US support look like? And could Europe step in to fill funding and equipment gaps?
No, that will be my honest answer. It's most unlikely, as the presenter himself is going to admit in a minute. It's seriously unlikely. Outside of a few countries, of the larger European countries, many European countries have smallish armies and just don't have the logistics to provide this stuff. They need 5 or 10 years to ramp up military production or to get that stuff in place. And I doubt the local citizenry is going to be very pleased when you start saying, next year, chaps, we're going to start giving 2 to 3 billion quid or 2 to 3 billion euros to Ukraine. I can't really see you selling this stuff easily.
Let's look at spending, first of all. The US is the biggest individual spender by some margin. This shows all military aid going into Ukraine. And
no expense spared here at the BBC's graphics department, you can see. Someone set to work with a laptop from Curry's for a couple of £100 in a back room somewhere.
Red, the United States. In blue, every other country combined. That is a huge amount of cash for Europe and other countries to find. Very roughly, to
just wait till you see the graphics of the next bit. You will die laughing.
Keep the same level of spending without the US, every other country would have to double its military support. It's a big ask when there are so many pressures on public.
Big ask. You could. There was a time when BBC presenters just didn't talk like that. It was a big ask, a major commitment, something like that might have been a better way. It's a big ask. Oh my goodness sake.
Spending. For the UK, that's about £2.8 billion extra every year. Then there's equipment. This is a HIMARS rocket launcher. The US has provided,
as rendered very quickly and very crudely using, I don't know, some piece of software in a very crude form, but that's nothing. I mean, at least it looks semi-presentable. Wait till you see the next thing.
Did 39 of these to Ukraine, according to the Kiel Institute think tank. European countries combined have provided 43 similar systems. There are these long-range ATACMS missiles,
which look like they stepped out of an Amiga computer game from the mid-1990s, rendered with loving care there.
Provided by Washington. There are European alternatives like the British Storm Shadows, but ATACMS have been important for Ukraine's army. And then there's ammunition. A huge volume of artillery has been used.
Oh look, we got some clip. They found some clip shots. I mean, okay, I'm only using Zoom to do this, but I'm just a bloke talking on here. The BBC has a very large budget. You would have thought, even though they're doing it in a hurry, someone could have done a bit of a better job than that.
In this conflict, the US has sent more than 4.5 million rounds. The EU previously missed its timetable for sending just 1 million. Production in Europe has increased. The EU has promised 2 million rounds in 2025, but some experts have questioned whether that pledge can be met. Now, this is some of the quantifiable support. Remember, some of it isn't, like intelligence assistance. And the debate around support for Ukraine raises other questions about US support for NATO. This was what Elon Musk said over the weekend. He thinks it's time for the USA to leave the alliance, and that would have a huge...
Do you get the feeling that the BBC is slowly trying to kind of push the narrative that Britain should walk away from this? On one hand, you've got Keir Starmer promising money, but on the other hand, you've got the BBC here pushing this. I'm getting the feeling that sort of Keir will help Zelensky out to a certain extent, but slowly distance himself out over time and walk backwards. I can't really see. I mean, I think it's disgraceful the way that Zelensky's been thrown under a bus almost, but I can't really see a Keir Starmer finding it an easy sell to sell a war in Ukraine, a country, to be quite frank, most British people don't know a lot about Ukraine. If I was to sit here and try and do a basic history of the area, most people would be bemused and they wouldn't know anything about it. If I started going on about city-states that coalesced into nations or so on and things like that, they wouldn't be overly interested. Right now they're more interested in things like cost of living and can I keep the heating on. And unfortunately, Keir Starmer is, well, not a terribly popular prime minister. Mr. Inaction Man has not garnered a lot of support. I'm really unhappy to see the way that Zelensky's had to cave to this. But unfortunately, of course, pragmatically, he's got little choice because he has to somehow keep his country going in some way and he's got nowhere else to turn. And if you were to class all the countries involved as animals, and we were to do this as Animal Farm, the updated version, the USA would be basically an elephant on the farm who's suddenly arrived and is taking up large stretches of it, and everybody else will be a heck of a lot smaller. So I do think that without US support, eventually there will have to be a surrender of territory, whether I like it or not. Meanwhile, over in Ireland, where they've also been reporting on this with these updated news reports. By the way, RTE, please get someone to check these for editing. I've been reading these throughout the day, and some of the spelling and in there and grammatical errors is ridiculous. It really is. But that's not what really concerns me. It's this. Cabinet signs off on €100 million aid package for Ukraine. I can't see selling this to the Irish public as a great proposition. Ireland currently has a homeless crisis that's been going on for, well, several years now, and it's causing major stress and dismay in the nation. Now, if a TD or the Taoiseach has to come along and try and sell that to the public, I really can't see him standing up in front of the Dáil over in Ireland and selling that with any great ease. Also, there are concerns about whether the triple lock has been broken and how that affects Irish neutrality. Again, much as I dislike, and I'm going to stress it again, Zelensky being not just thrown under a bus, but steamrolling under the bus, these countries also have their own internal issues and problems. And Simon Harris, I think, was going to find this a very hard sell when there are basically, I think at the last count, the last time I looked, there was something like 13,000 people homeless in Ireland, and that's in a small country of 5 and a bit million. He's going to find it a hard sell there to do it. Honestly, I think the welcome arms that were extended to the first groups of Ukrainians in Ireland going there, well, I think the welcome has cooled significantly, sadly, over time. And I think there's now a measure of almost contempt at times that I've encountered looking at media. It's a very sad thing to see, and And Zelensky will be going back home to a country where he'll feel, unfortunately, battered and beaten. And of course, Donald can pat himself at the back and say he's won. But my view is, in the long term, it's time for Britain and Ireland and all the European countries to think about, is it time, if America's going to try and distance itself from them, is it time to do the same in reverse? America is not the universe. It didn't exist in its current form 250 years ago. It wasn't even a superpower, really, 110 or 120 years ago, which is only slightly longer than a long human lifespan. It's time for European countries to start thinking about how they can defend themselves and waking up to doing that. In that respect, which is something that Donald keeps going on about, it's one of the few areas I might agree with him, but not for the reasons Donald would submit that point of view. I'd put it forward so that we can get out from under the American envelope, the umbrella, as much as possible, because it's become an umbrella that's basically closing on people and suffocating them.